All right, today we're going to explore a parable. It's a special kind of story, one that's designed to help us untangle the often haunting world of the writer Franz Kafka. And we're going to do that through the story of The Last Weaver. It's a pretty strange question, isn't it? I mean, how can absence, literally nothing, become a way for us to understand these huge ideas about art and loneliness and that spiritual hunger we all sometimes feel? Well, that's the mystery we're going to try to unravel together.
So let's just dive in. Let's step into his world. It's a world that, on the surface, seems pretty simple. But, like all great fables, it's holding a much, much deeper truth about what it means to be human.
Okay, so our story kicks off in a city that's famous for its beautiful, tangible art. But our guy, the Last Weaver, he's doing something completely different. I want you to just picture this scene for a second. You've got this master craftsman, and he's sitting in front of a totally empty loom. His hands are moving with this intense, almost agonizing precision, but he's not using any silk or wool, nothing you can actually see or touch. And at first, people were fascinated. They'd flock to his workshop, treating his invisible work like some kind of grand performance, a mystery they could whisper about. They were totally mesmerized by his focus. But let's be honest, they were in love with the show, not the art itself. Yeah. But see, for the Weaver, this wasn't a performance. He felt this deep, real satisfaction from his work. He could see patterns and textures that nobody else could. But that very mastery, it created this huge gap between him and everyone watching. He was completely alone inside his own creation, isolated by the very thing that gave his life meaning. And this, of course, brings us to the central conflict of the story. Because wherever you find art, you're going to find commerce. And those two, they almost never see eye to eye. So here's the problem, laid out plain and simple. For the Weaver, his work was this grand spiritual ambition. It was going to take a whole lifetime of uninterrupted work to get it perfect. It was, infinite. But his manager, the merchant, he was a practical guy. He knew that mystery is a product, and it has a shelf life. He looked at that empty frame and just saw an audience getting bored, so he started imposing deadlines. You can imagine how the Weaver felt, right? It was a profound insult. These deadlines, they suggested there was some kind of end product, something to be sold. But for him, the process was the whole point. The act of weaving was his reality. And he started to really resent the crowds, the people who would ask to touch the cloth, because that simple question just proved they didn't get it at all. And with every invisible thread he wove, he just felt more and more alone. Well, inevitably, the world moved on. The Weaver's abstract, demanding art just couldn't compete with what was new and shiny. And so his slow, tragic decline began. You can really see the sad path of his career here. He goes from being this celebrated mystery in a huge grand hall to a fading curiosity in some back room. And finally, he's just this strange old relic stuck in the corner of a loud factory. Workers would rush past him carrying these heavy bolts of bright, mass-produced fabric, sometimes tripping over his stool without even looking back. He wasn't an artist anymore. He was just in the way. And here's the really painful irony. It was only when he was totally ignored, when he was free from the pressure of an audience, that he could finally work on the most complex parts of his design. He found this weird sort of creative freedom in being forgotten. He became a ghost in the machine, tirelessly weaving one last thing, a shroud, for a world that didn't even remember his name. So this brings us to the end of his life. It's a cold winter morning, and a young apprentice finds him collapsed against his silent, empty loom. And he's finally ready to explain what it was all for. With a voice that sounds like cracking paper, that's the first thing he says. I mean, what a shocking thing to hear. His entire life's work, this incredible, invisible masterpiece, was never meant for the world. It was never meant to be seen by living eyes. He goes on explaining why he rejected the physical world. He says silk, wool, all the things his city was famous for, they felt rough, suffocating to him. His art was his escape from the tangible world, his search for something pure. And here is the heart of it all. He spent his entire life searching for this paradox, a fabric that felt like nothing, but could somehow provide the weight of a soul, a kind of spiritual nourishment he couldn't find anywhere else. After he says this, the apprentice just watches as the Weaver's hands give one last little ghostly tug, and then they fall still. His masterpiece was finished. And it was exactly what it had always been, an empty space filled with nothing but his own unfulfilled longing. So what happens when the artist is gone? What fills that void left behind by his silent, invisible art? Well, turns out the world does not like empty space. This is what was left of the Weaver. Not some grand monument, not even his name carved in a stone. He was just buried, and the memory of his entire life's work was buried right along with him. A total, complete erasure from history. And what replaced him? In that exact same dusty corner where he used to sit, the factory owners installed a brand new machine. And this thing wasn't silent or subtle. No, it roared with this terrifying energy. It was a symbol of industry, of real, tangible production. The same workers who used to just ignore him would now gather around this press, warming their hands on its metal frame. It cranked out miles of thick, heavy blankets, things that were practical, real, useful. The press satisfied a very basic physical need for warmth that the Weaver's invisible threads never could. And so, he was forgotten. So, okay, let's step back from a story for a second. What does this whole tragic tale actually tell us? Let's break down how this parable is really a powerful metaphor for all those big themes you find in Kafka's work. The Weaver's story is basically Kafka's universe in a nutshell. You see the deep isolation of the individual. You see the decline of so-called high art in a world that just wants something practical. You can feel that deep hunger for spiritual meaning. And crucially, you see the artist who pushes away the world, but at the same time, desperately needs that world to recognize him. He's chasing a standard of perfection that just, well, it can't exist in our messy, hungry human lives. And in the end, it shows the victory of the visceral, the warm blanket, the roaring machine, over the quiet, intellectual idea. And all of this leaves us with one last, really unsettling question. When we think about his life, we have to ask ourselves, was his dedication to this invisible art a noble pursuit? Almost divine? Was he a kind of martyr for a higher standard of perfection?
Or was it a tragedy of a completely different kind? Was his art not some great achievement, but really just a symptom? A symptom of a man so alienated, so unable to connect with the coarse, beautiful textures of the real world, that his only choice was to retreat into nothing. The story doesn't give us the answer. It just leaves us to decide for ourselves what the Weaver's sacrifice really meant.